This happened in 2018 in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. I was 38, freelancing full-time, working from home and living entirely in my head. I'd been on deadline for weeks, sleeping at odd hours, convincing myself flexibility was freedom when really it just meant never shutting off. So I planned a solo day hike to reset, just loop trail. 5 hours, maybe less. I wanted my legs tired and my thoughts quiet. A few nights before, I'd gone down an internet rabbit hole, one of those old hiking forums that looks abandoned but still technically exists. Someone mentioned a shortcut that cut almost an hour off the loop. It was described like a local secret. Look for the ribbon and the stacked stones. It's obvious. Obvious should have been my warning. The trail started normal, with that clean smell of wet earth. Road noise faded. My phone still had service. I remember feeling smug about being out there alone, moving at my own pace. About an hour and a half in, the main trail curved uphill. Off to the side, there was a narrow track. It was too narrow, didn't look like anything official, but it was worn enough to look intentional. Right there, I saw an old ribbon tied to a branch, washed out by the sun. A crude arrow scratched into the bark, and a little pile of stones, too neat to be accidental. It matched the forum description exactly. I stood there longer than I should have, doing the usual internal argument. You're overthinking. It's daylight. People do this all the time. You came here to clear your head, not spiral. So I stepped off the trail. The change was quick. The ground dropped faster than it should have for a shortcut. The trees closed in. The path became loose gravel and slick stone. Then the terrain opened into a narrow ravine. Steep walls on both sides, damp rock, uneven footing. And then I smelled it. Took a second to register. Just something sharp in the air. Then it clicked. Cigarette smoke. Not wood smoke. Not campfire. Cigarettes have a dry, papery bite that doesn't belong in wet stone. I stopped walking right there. "Hello?" I called. Silence. I took a few more steps. The smell faded, then came back, like moving. I tried to explain it away. Someone passed through earlier. Smells linger. Then I saw the cigarette butt. It sat on a flat rock near the wall, tucked into a shallow dip like it had been placed there. Damp, but not old. The paper's still yellow, not gray. Looked recent. I nudged it with a leaf, feeling ridiculous, like I was collecting proof for no one. I pulled my phone out and saw there was no service. So I kept moving because stopping felt worse. The ravine narrowed. The stone walls crept closer. The ground slid under my boots, even when I stepped carefully. Then I noticed the scrape marks, repeated scuffs along the wall at shoulder height, like something had brushed past the same spot again and again. I told myself it was backpacks, gear, people squeezing through, but the gravel didn't show clear footprints ahead of me, nothing leading out. The ravine dipped and ended in a smooth stone spillway that rose steeply ahead. Climbable, maybe, but slick and unforgiving. I stopped and listened. A pebble fell. Just one. It clicked down the wall behind me. I hadn't moved. I lifted my phone light and turned. For half a second, high on the right wall, I saw an outline. Something human-shaped but incomplete, like a knee or elbow tucked behind rock. Then it was gone. I decided to turn back. The slope I'd walked down felt steeper going up. Loose rock slid. My boot slipped. My hands slammed against damp stone. Skin tore. That warm sting told me I'd broken skin, but there was no time to care. I climbed anyway. The cigarette smell came again, stronger, then vanished. Then came back, like someone was moving around me. I reached a point where the ravine widened just enough to reveal a narrow side cut, barely a way up, more like a flaw in the rock than a path. I didn't think. I climbed. I scraped my arms, grabbed roots that might have been dead, hauled myself upward inch by inch. My knee hit stone. My hands burned. But I got onto a narrow shelf and crouched behind a boulder, breathing hard. For a moment, there was only wind and my own breath. Then I heard it. A lighter flick. Then silence. No voice. No footsteps. just the space swallowing sound again. I didn't wait. I scrambled along the shelf until I found a way up into the trees. It took longer than I want to admit. I fell once, crawled part of it. When I finally stumbled onto the main trail, it felt unreal, like stepping through a hidden door. There were other hikers, laughing, normal. I smiled like I was fine and walked past them. I sat in my car for a long time before driving. Hands on the wheel, breathing steady, just processing the fact that I'd walked into something I didn't understand. Weeks later, I noticed red clay still packed into the seams of my boots from the ravine. I could have cleaned it easily. I didn't. They're still like that. A thin line of rust-colored dirt I won't scrub out. A reminder that I thought I was taking a shortcut, when really, I think I followed something someone left there on purpose. This was 2016. I was 19, a freshman engineering student who thought watching gear reviews counted as experience. Me, Caleb, and our friend Joe decided to do our first real backpacking trip in the San Juan Mountains. We didn't go far, just far enough out to feel accomplished. Our gear was cheap and mismatched. My sleeping bag claimed it could handle cold, it absolutely couldn't. Joe brought a stove that worked fine at home and then stopped cooperating at altitude. Caleb insisted we didn't need bear spray because, in his words, we're loud. We set up near the edge of the tree line in a small clearing. Not an official campsite, just flat ground, an old fire ring, and trees thick enough behind us to block the wind. It felt safe, like a place other people had clearly used before. We cooked ramen, oversalted it, and talked about nothing important. Phones were already dying from photos and music. Caleb played a song off his phone until the battery dropped into the red and he shut it off. By midnight, the fire was down to embers. The mountains got quiet in that way that makes you realize how much noise normal life has. Even our voices sounded louder than they should have. At some point, we stopped talking. Just one of those pauses where no one has anything ready to say. And then, in that moment, we heard footsteps. Joe straightened up. Caleb's face stayed confident, but his eyes didn't. "It's probably just an elk," Caleb said out loud. The footsteps stopped, like someone had paused to listen. Caleb waited a second and called out, "Hello?" Just silence. Even the background sounds felt muted for a beat. We all looked at each other. I laughed, but it didn't reflect how tense I felt. Joe said, "Wildlife's weird," like he was trying to convince himself. We kept talking, forcing normal conversation back into place. About classes, about dumb stuff, anything. Then we went quiet again. The footsteps resumed. Joe turned on his headlamp and swept the trees. The footsteps stopped. He held the beam locked. Nothing, just trunks and brush and reflective leaves. He lowered the light. The footsteps came back. I said, "Okay, that's not random." Caleb tried to joke. "Maybe it's a deer messing with us." Joe didn't laugh. Deer don't stop walking when you talk. We tested it. Shine a light. Silence. Turn it off. Footsteps again. It started sounding like the steps were shifting position. Not closing in, not leaving. Just changing angles around us. Then it sounded like it moved from one side to the other too fast. I know how that sounds. I've replayed it enough times to know all the logical explanations. Sound travel's weird. Acoustics are deceptive. But sitting there, it felt like either someone was moving really fast or it wasn't one person. Caleb finally said, "We should just go to bed." Joe didn't move. "In the tents?" Caleb nodded. "Yeah, like normal people." I wanted to agree. Crawling into a sleeping bag felt safer than admitting we were scared of something we couldn't see. We argued in whispers, like that somehow kept things calm. Joe wanted to pack up and leave immediately. Caleb didn't want to hike in the dark. Nobody wanted to be the one who overreacted. Then a branch snapped. Close, inside the edge of the light. Joe whipped his headlamp toward the sound. The beam shook across trees, but found nothing. Just empty forest. Caleb stood and shouted, "Hey, we see you. Knock it off." Silence. Then one footstep. Just one. Joe didn't hesitate. Car. He said it like a decision already made. We packed fast and sloppy. Stuff went into bags half-zipped. Tent stakes got yanked out bent. No one cared anymore. And the moment we started breaking camp, the footsteps stopped. Like that was the outcome it wanted. We didn't run. We moved fast but careful. Running in the dark would have made things worse. Headlamps bounced as we hiked, shadows jumping everywhere. We reached the car and piled in. Doors slammed harder than intended. Caleb locked his twice. Joe started the engine immediately. We sat there with the headlights blasting into the trees, trying to pretend it was funny. Caleb finally said, "Okay, not an elk." Joe joked about forest spirits. I laughed because not laughing felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to. We slept in the car. Or tried to. Someone kept waking up to check the windows. In the morning, we drove back up to grab what we'd left behind. Daylight was supposed to prove we were dramatic. The campsite looked exactly the same. Then Joe pointed at the ground near the fire ring. Footprints. Not ours. Different tread. Bigger boots. And they weren't random. They curved around where we'd been sitting. We stood there silently. No one wanted to name it. On the drive home, Caleb tried turning it into a story. The footsteps weren't there to scare us. They were there to make sure we didn't stay. It was Mount Hood National Forest, summer of 2019. I was 34 and training for a longer trek later that year. I picked a quieter trail on purpose. I wanted steady movement without interruptions. No chatting, no adjusting my pace for strangers. I did all the responsible things. I texted a friend my trailhead and when I expected to be back. I parked where other cars were visible. I carried water, snacks, a headlamp I didn't plan to need, and kept my earbuds in my pocket instead of my ears. I like knowing what's around me. The trail started the way Oregon trails usually do. Cool air, damp needles underfoot, and that soft silence that makes you lower your voice without thinking. I remember feeling settled and focused. About 20 minutes in, I heard footsteps behind me. But trails are shared spaces. Someone else hiking wasn't unusual, and the sound wasn't close enough to feel intrusive. But it stayed present, the same distance behind me through one bend, then another. No fading, no passing, no obvious change in pace. I told myself the normal story. Another solo hiker, similar speed, same plan. It happens. Still, when the trail widened briefly, I stepped to the side and slowed. Trail etiquette, a clear signal to pass. The footsteps came closer, but he didn't pass. They stayed behind me. Not even a quick morning or on your left. Just the same measured distance. The trail stayed wide enough. There was no reason not to pass. That's when my internal alarm started buzzing. So I tested it. I sped up slightly. The footsteps sped up too. Okay. I slowed down again, shortening my stride. The footsteps slowed with me. I stopped to pretend to adjust my shoe, crouching longer than necessary. The footsteps stopped too. I couldn't see him, but I could hear enough to know he hadn't turned around. There was no retreating sound. I stood up and started walking again. The footsteps resumed immediately. I tried to keep it normal. I looked back and called out, friendly and casual, "Hey, good morning." No response. That silence felt intentional, chosen even. The trail narrowed after that. Roots, rocks, tighter turns, the kind of terrain where passing takes effort. He stayed behind me, and I started noticing what I didn't hear. No water sloshing, no zipper pulls, no trekking poles, no jacket fabric, just footsteps. When I reached a fork, I chose the less obvious path, the one with fewer prints and more debris. Not because it felt safer, but because I wanted to break the pattern. The footsteps followed without hesitation. That's when the rational explanations started failing. I wasn't scared yet, but I was alert in a way that felt heavy, like my body was preparing for something. I caught a partial glimpse of him as the trail curved, neutral-colored clothing, average build, maybe middle-aged. Nothing distinctive. and no backpack. That detail bothered me more than it should have. This wasn't a short loop near a parking lot. Everyone carried something out here. He carried nothing. I wanted witnesses, noise, other people. So I decided to break the pattern in the safest way I could think of. Ahead was a small clearing people used for photos, visible from the trail, not hidden. I stepped into it and stopped. If he was just another hiker, this was where he'd pass. He didn't. He stopped too. Still not fully visible, but close enough that I could hear the movement of his feet in the dirt. The sound of someone settling in place. I turned slowly. He was there, partly blocked by a tree, positioned at an angle where he could see me without stepping fully into view. We looked at each other for a brief moment. Then he spoke. "You're doing great," he said. "Keep going." It sounded like instruction, like commentary, like he'd been watching long enough to feel entitled to speak. I didn't answer. I didn't smile. I turned back to the trail and started walking. Faster now, but controlled. I could feel the strain in my shoulders, not from effort, but from awareness. His footsteps returned immediately. I kept going until the trail merged with a busier section. You can hear it before you see it. Voices, laughter, the dull knock of poles. When I spotted 2 hikers ahead, relief hit hard and fast. I caught up to them. "Hey," I said, trying to force a normal tone. "Mind if I walk with you for a bit?" They nodded easily. The woman gave me a knowing look without asking questions. I looked back. He was still there for a moment, 30 yards behind. Then he slowed, stepped aside, let another group pass between us, and then he was gone, like he'd never existed. I finished the hike with those strangers and thanked them a lot. I walked to my car with my keys threaded between my fingers, feeling foolish and doing it anyway. Nothing happened in the lot. No confrontation, no scene. But when I reached my trunk, I noticed a streak in the dust near my license plate. Not a clear print, more like a palm drag. Could have been anything. Except I hadn't opened my trunk since I arrived. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it, and realized something uncomfortable. He didn't need to catch me on the trail. He just needed to learn my pace. I drove home watching my mirrors, knowing I'd done nothing wrong and still feeling changed. I still hike alone, but I don't take the quiet trails anymore. The woods don't scare me, but I learned the difference between being alone and being chosen. I used to be the guy who gave the safety speech, the quick one, right before closing. Someone grabs a headlamp or a blister kit, and I hit them with the basics like a checklist. Tell someone where you're going. Don't rely on your phone. Don't leave the trail. Don't chase noises in the dark. I said it so often it stopped feeling personal. Just something you repeat because it's right. Then this happened, and I realized how easy it is to give advice, and how hard it is to follow when you're standing alone on a trail and someone asks for help. This was in the Wasatch Range, summer of 2021. After work hike. I'd been on my feet all day at the store and wanted that clean, earned, tired feeling. No pack, no overnight plan. Just water, a snack, and enough daylight to catch the sunset before heading back. That area feels safe in a misleading way. You're not deep wilderness. If the wind shifts, you can hear a low highway noise. You can see the outlines of neighborhoods way down the slope. It makes you relax when you probably shouldn't. The trailhead lot was half full. A few people coming down, one runner blasting past like he was running from something. All normal. As I climbed, the trail emptied out. That wasn't unusual. It was getting late. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Then I heard a voice. "Help," it said. "Over here." It came from off the trail, down through the brush. I stopped automatically. It was a reflex. Like your body pauses before your brain finishes the sentence. I leaned toward the sound. I should have been able to see someone if they were that close. I couldn't. Just uneven brush and a shallow dip where the trail curved. I called back, loud. "Hey, are you okay?" There was a pause, then the same words again. Help, over here. What I found strange is that there was no strain, no urgency. It sounded placed. I told myself it could still be normal. People react weirdly when they're hurt. People panic, people freeze. And there's a trap baked into those words. Help. If you walk away and someone actually needs you, that sticks. So I did what I always told customers to do. Stay on the trail, get eyes on the situation, don't charge into brush you can't see through. I moved a few steps forward to get a better angle and called again. Where are you? No answer to the question. Just, help, over here. This time it came from slightly farther left. Not by much, enough to notice. That's when the unease sharpened. The voice wasn't reacting, it was guiding. I tried once more. What's wrong? Are you injured? Pause. Help, over here. Same sentence, same rhythm, like it lived on a loop. I should have turned around then, walked back to the car and called it in. Clean choice. But there's a social pressure to being a decent person. Your brain fills in consequences for you. What if someone's actually hurt? What if you're wrong? And this wasn't some remote canyon. This was a popular range. Easy to believe someone twisted an ankle stepping off the trail for a photo. So I advanced again, still staying on the path, trying to see more without committing. I reached a spot where the brush dipped and I could see a small flat area between rocks. No person, no pack, nothing. I called out again. I can't see you. Can you come up to the trail? Pause. Help, over here. Again, a slightly different direction. Now behind thicker brush, a place that would force me off the trail to get eyes on. That was the moment the situation stopped feeling ambiguous. It wasn't just that the voice was flat, it was that it was leading me. I stepped off the trail anyway. Just one step, told myself I'd stop right there. My boot hit something wrong. A flattened patch of dirt. Smoothed down, like someone had stood there long enough to wear it in. If someone was injured, they wouldn't be standing in one spot. If someone was waiting, they would. I stayed still, listening. That's when I heard another sound. Not the voice. Movement, behind a brush deeper than the flat spot. Not an animal crashing away. Not careless. Someone trying to stay quiet and failing only because gravel and branches don't cooperate. I eased backward toward the trail. Then the voice spoke again, but this time it didn't say the same thing. It said, "Are you okay?" My exact words. It sounded like hearing your own voice played back through a damaged speaker. Close enough to recognize, wrong enough to feel invasive. That's when the thought landed clearly. This isn't someone needing help. I stepped back onto the trail and started walking. Running makes noise. Running makes mistakes. I kept my pace steady, posture relaxed, like I belonged there. And immediately I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't look back. Looking back gives information. I walked until the trail curved and forced us out of direct line. The footsteps adjusted with me. I paused, like I was checking my phone. The footsteps stopped. I walked again. They walked again. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence and started feeling like control. Ahead, I saw another hiker. Bright shirt, slow pace, taking photos. I called out to him like we were old friends. He turned and waved. Behind me, the footsteps disappeared. I didn't finish the loop. I walked straight back to the parking lot. My hands shook when I unlocked my car. I think it's because my body had been holding itself tight for too long and finally let go. I sat there for a minute before calling it in. I kept it factual, no drama. Off-trail help call, repeated phrase. Voice mimicked my words. Followed on the trail. The response was polite and thin. We'll keep an eye out. That was it. A week later at work, I mentioned it while restocking packs. One of my coworkers, older local guy, didn't look surprised. Yeah, he said. People do that sometimes. Help calls, try to pull you into the brush. I asked where he'd heard that. He shrugged. Rumors, warnings. Somebody always knows somebody. After that night, I added one more line to my safety speech. If someone calls for help and it doesn't sound right, don't try to be the hero in a place where no one can see what you're stepping into. This happened in 2017 at the Superior National Forest. I was working as a veterinary tech in Duluth, and I'd gotten into the habit of doing quick solo overnights whenever my schedule lined up. Not to prove anything, I was just tired of being needed every second at work. Phones ringing, animals panicking, owners crying, the feeling that you're always behind no matter how fast you move. Out there, things made sense. You ate when you were hungry. You slept when it got dark. The woods were never quiet, and that was comforting. Noise meant life. I brought my dog, Judy. Medium-sized mutt. Smart, stubborn, alert without being aggressive. She wasn't trained for protection. She just paid attention. The campsite wasn't deep wilderness. One of those roadside forest spots. Fire ring, metal grate, trees thick enough to block sight lines. Other camps were scattered around the lake, but at night you couldn't see them. If someone had a lantern on, you might catch a faint glow through the trees. Mostly, it felt like your own pocket of dark. I set up the tent while Judy did her patrol loops, cooked a basic meal, watched the lake turn black as the sun dropped, checked the food hang twice because I always do, brushed my teeth with a headlamp on and laughed quietly at how dramatic that felt. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't keyed up. I was tired in a good way. Around midnight, the fire was down to coals. I was zipped into my sleeping bag with a paperback open, Judy curled at my feet. Outside, the usual night soundtrack was going. Bugs, frogs, water, small movements in the brush that didn't mean anything. Then it stopped. Not gradually, like the wind died. It just ended. No insects, no frogs, no texture to the air at all. I held my breath instinctively. Judy's head came up instantly. She went rigid, ears forward, staring at the tent wall like she could see through it. My first thought was stupid and automatic. Did my headlamp die? Then I heard a branch snap. One clean sound, like a stick pressed until it broke. I waited. Another snap. Different direction. I whispered Judy's name. She didn't move. I turned my phone flashlight on and aimed it at the tent wall, turning the nylon pale and glowing. Tree shadows moved faintly. Nothing else. I told myself it was probably an animal. Maybe a deer. Something big could make things quiet. But animals don't silence an entire forest at once. Another snap. Closer. This time I could place it near the fire ring, near the cooler. I turned the light off again. Being illuminated suddenly felt wrong. Snap. Another direction. I sat up slowly. The silence pressed in, heavy enough that I could hear my heart in my ears. Judy made a low, unsure rumble, like a question. That was worse, because it meant she wasn't trying to scare something off. She was assessing it. I reached for my keys, phone, and bear spray. My hands felt clumsy, stiff. Another snap, close enough that I didn't have to imagine where it came from. Then another, and another. Slow, evenly spaced. It was moving around the campsite. Right, left, behind. Like someone taking inventory. I had the thought, sharp and humiliating, that this was the moment people in stories make a bad decision. And I hated that comparison because this wasn't a story. This was my tent, my car, my campsite. I unzipped the tent as quietly as I could. The sound felt deafening. Judy slipped out first, low to the ground, sticking close to my leg like she'd suddenly learned new rules. The clearing looked normal. That was the cruel part. Fire ring, chair, cooler, trees standing exactly where they'd been all day. But the forest still wasn't making noise. I moved fast, enough that my footsteps sounded louder than I wanted. I didn't look into the trees for long. I didn't want to see something and have my brain latch onto it. I got into the car and slammed the door, locked it immediately. I didn't start the engine. The idea of the noise felt like announcing myself. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, another snap. just outside the reach of my headlights, near the fire ring. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, bear spray useless in my lap, staring through the windshield and trying to see movement between trunks. Eventually, the forest sounds crept back in. Slowly, one layer at a time. Bugs first, then water, then wind. That almost made it worse, because it made it easier to pretend nothing had happened. I didn't sleep. I waited for the sky to lighten, for the trees to become trees again. In the morning, nothing was obviously wrong. Pine needles and soft dirt hide details. No clean footprints. But things weren't where I left them. My chair was turned toward the tree line instead of the lake. The food hang rope had dropped differently, like someone had handled it and let go. My folding saw wasn't on the log anymore. It was on the ground beside the fire ring. All of it could be explained. Wind, animals, chance. But animals don't move in measured intervals while the entire forest goes silent. I packed up fast. Like, if I moved quickly enough, I could outrun the feeling. When I got home, I told people the trip was fine. I didn't explain. Because the second you try to describe that kind of silence, people start looking at you like you're trying to convince them of something. But even now, if I'm outside at night and the sound drops too suddenly, if the bugs cut out all at once, I stop whatever I'm doing and listen. Because I learned something out there that I didn't want to learn. The forest isn't scary when it's loud. It's scary when it goes quiet. If these stories made you realize how thin the line is between adventure and mistake, smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss the next nightmare, and let me know which story got under your skin. And if you think isolation is scary on a trail, wait until you see what happens in places even further from help. Click now to watch 4 really scary remote places stories, because when no one can hear you, fear gets very patient. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.